Hello, everyone. Wishing you all good health, peace, and the kind of love that can withstand life's trials. For Lai Tayuka and CEO Hung, happiness had never been simple. It was something they built carefully, piece by piece, through pain, patience, and hope. Just when life seemed to finally grant them peace, fate intervened. An unexpected incident struck like a storm, shaking the fragile walls of the world they had created together. Their love, once a safe haven, now faced its greatest test. Would this trial pull them apart? Or would it prove that true happiness is not the absence of hardship, but the courage to hold on to each other through it all? The morning began like any other, soft sunlight pouring through the windows, the laughter of little Han filling the air, and the gentle cooing of baby Long nestled in Lai Tua's arms. The courtyard smelled of fresh dew, and for a brief moment, life felt safe, simple, and whole. Tayuka looked at CEO Hung, who was helping Han tie her shoes, and her heart swelled with quiet gratitude. After years of hardship, happiness had finally found its way into her small family. But life has a way of testing the things we treasure most. Just as the family prepared to share breakfast, the sudden roar of an approaching motorbike shattered the calm. Dust rose on the dirt path outside, and a man's harsh voice called out from beyond the gate. Tuhuka froze, her body stiffening as though the sound alone had dragged her back to a past she wished to forget. Hung stepped forward, protective instinct flashing in his eyes. "Stay inside," he whispered to Tukuka, but she shook her head, her face pale. She already knew who it was. The gate swung open, and there he stood, Ken, her ex-husband. His clothes were worn, his face hardened by bitterness, but his eyes burned with something darker, resentment.
Tieu, Ken sneered, his voice cutting through the morning air. "So this is your new life? Living under another man's roof, raising my child as if he were his own?" His gaze fell on little Han, who clung tightly to her mother's skirt, fear trembling in her small body. Hung's jaw tightened. He stepped between them, his presence towering, unyielding. "You have no right to be here, Ken. Leave before you regret it."
Botkin laughed, a bitter, broken laugh. "You think money and power make you her savior? Those children are mine too. Do you think I'll just disappear while you take everything from me?" Tayu's heart raced, her hands trembling as she held baby Long closer. Memories of years of suffering, abandonment, and betrayal clawed their way back into her mind. Yet now, standing in her yard with her new family at risk, she knew she could not stay silent. "Ken," her voice shook but carried strength, "you left us when we needed you most. These children deserve love, not anger. Don't come here to destroy the little peace we've found." For a moment, silence fell heavy, suffocating. Han's frightened sob broke it, her small voice pleading, "Mommy, don't let him take me away." Hung pulled them closer, his protective arm wrapping around them. His eyes burned with determination. "Listen well, Ken. You walked away once, but if you try to hurt them again, you will find me standing in your way." The tension hung in the air like a storm about to break. Tuu's heart pounded, torn between fear of the past and hope for the future. She had fought too long for this fragile happiness, and she knew, no matter what came next, she would fight harder than ever to protect it. The test had arrived, unexpected and merciless. Whether peace or storm lay ahead, one thing was certain: the love binding this small family would be pushed to its limits. Ken's presence lingered like a shadow over their peaceful home. Though CEO Hung had forced him to leave that morning, the look in Ken's eyes had carried a warning. This was not the end. That evening, Lai Tayuka sat by the window, cradling baby Long as she watched Han sleep. The child had cried herself into exhaustion, clinging to her mother and whispering, "Don't let him take me, Mommy." Those words echoed painfully in Tayu's heart. She knew Ken's return was not just an interruption, it was a storm threatening everything she had built with Hung. Hung entered quietly, placing a warm hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to be afraid," he whispered. "Ken cannot take them from you." But she turned to him, her eyes brimming with tears. "Hung, you don't understand. He is their father by law. If he tries to fight us in court, if he demands custody..." Her voice cracked, the fear too heavy to hide. Hung knelt beside her, his eyes firm, unwavering. "Then, let him try. I will not let him win. These children are yours in love, in sacrifice, in everything that matters. And I will stand with you, no matter how difficult the battle becomes. Just as his words wrapped around her like a promise, the sound of a car engine rumbled outside. Hung's father stepped into the room, his face grave. In his hand was a letter, official, sealed, and heavy with consequence. It came today, the old man said, laying the document on the table. Kan has filed the petition. He wants custody of Han. The room fell silent. Tieu breath caught in her throat, her arms tightening around baby Long. Her worst fear had come true. The storm had begun. Hung's father looked at his son, then at Tieu. We must prepare. Kan has nothing but pride and bitterness, yet the law will listen to him because he is the biological father. But we will not lose. We will gather every truth, every witness, to show the court who truly raised this child, who truly gave her a home. Hung clenched his fists. If Ken wants a war, then he will have it. But we will not fight with hatred. We will fight with the truth and with love. Tieu's heart trembled, torn between fear and determination. She had walked alone through years of darkness, but now she was no longer alone. Hung's hand was in hers. His father's support stood beside her, and her children, her precious children, were her reason to endure whatever storm came next. The days before the court hearing were heavy with anxiety. The once cheerful home now carried an unspoken tension, as if every wall, every corner of the house waited for the storm to strike. Han no longer laughed as freely. She often sat quietly by the window, her eyes following her mother with worry too heavy for a child her age. Lai Tuuka tried to hide her fear, smiling for her children, cooking their favorite meals, and humming lullabies at night. But inside, her heart was breaking. Every time Han clung to her and whispered, "Mommy, you won't let him take me, right?" A dagger of guilt pierced deeper. She had endured suffering before, but never had she felt so powerless. CEO Hung refused to let despair take over. Each day, he traveled back and forth between work and meetings with lawyers. He gathered evidence, witnesses, and documents, medical records proving Ken had neglected his family, testimonies from neighbors who had seen Tieu raising the children alone, and even photographs of Han's milestones that Ken had never been there to witness. One evening, after returning home late, Hung found Tieu sitting on the porch, staring into the night sky. Baby Long slept in her arms, his tiny breaths steady and warm against her chest. "You haven't eaten," Hung said softly, placing a bowl of warm soup beside her. She smiled faintly but did not touch it. "Hung, what if the court doesn't see things as we do? What if the law says Han belongs with him?" "I couldn't bear it." Her voice cracked, her tears falling onto the baby's blanket. Hung sat beside her, his hand finding hers. "The law is not blind, Tieu. It listens to the truth. And the truth is that you are the one who has loved, raised, and sacrificed for Han. No judge can take away the bond you share with your child." She looked at him, her eyes filled with doubt but also with the smallest flicker of hope. "And if things go wrong?" He turned to her, his gaze steady, unwavering. "Then I will fight again and again until we win. Because this is not just your battle, Tieu, it's ours. You and I, we will protect this family together." In the distance, thunder rumbled faintly, as though the sky itself warned them of the storm that was coming. The day of the hearing arrived sooner than they expected. The courthouse loomed, tall and cold, its walls indifferent to the trembling hearts that entered it. Tieu held Han's hand tightly, her knuckles white, while Hung walked beside them, strong and resolute. Ken was already there, his presence sharp and menacing. He wore a suit, but his eyes betrayed his bitterness. He smirked as Tieu passed, his voice a venomous whisper. "Today, we'll see who Han truly belongs to." Tieu's heart raced, but she did not answer. Instead, she tightened her grip on Han's hand and lifted her chin. She was terrified, yes, but she was also a mother. And a mother does not surrender. As the doors to the courtroom opened, a heavy silence filled the air. Every step they took inside felt like stepping deeper into the storm. The battle for Han's future had begun. The story of Lai Tieu reminds us of one of life's deepest truths. Happiness is never given freely. It must be protected, nurtured, and fought for. For years, Tieu endured pain and abandonment, raising her children with quiet strength. She knew sleepless nights, silent tears, and the loneliness of carrying burdens no one else could see. Yet she never gave up. Her love for her children became her anchor, the unshakable force that kept her moving through storms. From her, we learn that a mother's love is not just affection, but sacrifice, resilience, and an unbreakable shield. When Ken returned to claim custody, it was not merely a legal battle, it was a test of love, of courage, and of truth. The courtroom became more than a place of judgment. It became a stage where past choices, hidden wounds, and unspoken sacrifices were laid bare. Through it all, CEO Hung stood beside Tayuka, proving that true love is not only about promises of happiness, but also about standing firm when darkness rises. The lesson is clear: peace and joy do not exist without trials. Storms will always come, often when we least expect them. But family is not destroyed by storms, it is tested and strengthened through them. What matters is not the force of the storm, but the strength of the love holding people together. Tieu Circus' journey teaches us that the greatest happiness is not in living a life free of hardship, but in knowing that no matter what trials appear, we are not alone. Love, when nurtured with honesty and sacrifice, has the power to overcome fear, heal wounds, and protect the future. In life, moments of happiness often feel fragile, as though they could be broken at any second. For Tayuka, every smile of her children, every quiet evening of peace with CEO Hung, was a treasure. Yet, happiness without challenge can never fully reveal its worth. Only when it is tested by hardship do we truly understand its strength. This story reminds us that love is not passive. It requires action, courage, and sometimes sacrifice. Tieu Circus' determination to protect her children shows us that being a parent is not just about giving birth, but about giving unconditional love, day after day, even when the world seems against you. At the same time, CEO Hung's presence reveals another important truth: no one should have to carry their battles alone. Life is not meant to be endured in solitude. When we find someone willing to walk beside us, to share our burdens and to fight for us, we are reminded that love is partnership. It multiplies strength and halves fear. And what of Ken, the man who returned with bitterness? His choices show us the danger of letting pride guide our actions. Love cannot grow from resentment. True fatherhood, true family, is not claimed through power or force, but through responsibility, care, and sacrifice. His presence in the story is a warning. If we fail to value what we have when it is ours, we may return too late to repair the damage. Ultimately, the greatest lesson is this: storms are inevitable, but they do not last forever. What endures is the bond we choose to protect. Tieu Circus' small family stood at the edge of uncertainty, yet their unity, love, and courage became their shield. In the same way, we too can face our storms not with fear, but with faith that love, when true and steadfast, will carry us through.